Hey YouTubers, welcome back and welcome to a new thing that I'm doing. I'm going to start a new thing called lines. And what these are basically is they're melodic ideas based on typical chord progressions. You know, oftentimes I'll get questions from players. They'll say like, what do I do when I get stuck? You know, I feel stuck and I seem like I'm playing the same thing over and over and over again. How do I get out of this hole that I'm in? Well, the answer that I always give is to learn from other players. You know, when you started music, when you started playing guitar, you started playing it because you heard, Jimi Hendrix, or you heard Kurt Cobain, or you heard George Benson, or whoever you were into, and you thought like, man, I want to make some music with it. You didn't think I want to play, technique studies and things like that, going through a Berkeley book or something. You really wanted to make music that you loved and enjoyed. So I always tell players, get back to your love, get back to your passion, learn things from other players. So start to transcribe songs and especially solos from other players. Now, it's not necessary to write them out. Like most of your great players, they transcribed solos from their heroes, and they just sort of learned them. But here's the key, though. They don't just learn them, but they learn why the player is doing what they're doing. They learn what it is that the player is doing. So, they might learn that, oh, you're playing a minor pentatonic over top of a minor chord. Or if you're in a major progression and it goes to a minor 4 chord, for instance. So if you're in C and you go to F minor, oh, I can play a melodic minor scale over top of that and it works really well. Those are the types of ideas where you get an idea in your head and you understand the bigger principle of why you do what you do. So, when Eric Clapton was figuring out Muddy Waters solos, or when Eric Johnson was figuring out Eric Clapton solos, they weren't just learning the lines, but they were learning sort of the why behind it. And a lot of times it wasn't even necessarily a head thing. I don't know that they all understood exactly what their heroes were doing, but they did understand with their ears how it was working musically. All right, so that's the spark that you get oftentimes from doing it. When we practice lines and get those ideas until they become proficient in our playing, we don't normally sound like somebody else then. We really sound like ourselves. We're an amalgamation of all kinds of different input. So what these lines are, and the idea behind them, is we all run into the same chord progressions over and over and over again, and these are melodic ideas that'll sort of be some creative ways of seeing through melodic ideas. A lot of times these were just myself, like listening to other players and getting sparks from those other players. But in them also, I try to not just describe what the line is, but oftentimes I'll describe why the line is. So when we do these lines, when we're doing this to dig ourselves out of a hole or just have some new creative input, they really help us in 3 different ways. They help us technically, because first of all, you have to figure out, you have to be able to play this certain line and be able to get it down in the progression in time. Very important for your physical development. They help our ears. They help us to hear things in a certain way. So sometimes we stretch our ears, or sometimes we come to understand things sonically that we didn't understand before, and we see how those things are played. But our ears start to develop. And then also we get a theory, which is sort of the overarching principle. Like I said before, seeing, we play a minor 4 chord and how you deal with that chord. And in the lines, I'll actually walk through how these things work. But you can think about it like this. It's a lot easier to think of it in this way. It's almost like language. If you've ever learned a foreign language, if you're in high school and you've got to learn German or something like that, I remember I had to take a German course when I was in college. The first thing that they do is they teach you vocabulary words. So you've got to develop a certain level of vocabulary. And then in that, they also start teaching you grammar, how the sentences work and how you put together these different vocabulary words with the conjugation of verbs or the types of nouns that you can use, or adjectives or adverbs or whatever. That you learn these things, how they're put together. But as we all know, that's not the end of the game. Like I remember I took a vacation once. I was at the Grand Canyon and I had just finished up this college course in German, and I thought that I could actually speak German because I had a pretty big vocabulary and I did understand the grammar pretty well. But there were these German girls next to us and I wanted to strike up a conversation. And as I was talking, within about 3 sentences, I realized I had no capability of carrying on a conversation with them, an abstract conversation. Now I could say like Harriet and Gertrude went to the record store, or these other ideas that I had learned in the class, sort of specific sentences. But to be able to talk freely, I was really locked up with that. Well, that's sentences. And as we learn sentences then, as we learn to develop a sentence, we can really speak freely then. So there was a sort of a chasm of difference between the grammar that I learned and the vocabulary and that abstract thought. And that's what happens with a lot of players. They'll learn like their chords or their scales or whatever, but they don't really learn how to apply these things. And that's really putting together sentences and building sentences. Well, lines are exactly that. It's how you build your sentences. It's how you get ideas so that all of a sudden you have a flow of ideas that come from you, that you don't have to just transcribe something from somebody else or write out your own. So, but you have this stuff that just sort of comes out of you abstractly. Like I'm speaking to you right now. I don't know exactly what I'm going to say, but I'm able to say it because I understand intuitively grammar and vocabulary, but then I put it together in a form. Miles Davis used to say this. He used to say, learn it and then unlearn it. And that was sort of a simple way of saying what I'm talking about. You develop these lines, you learn these lines, you apply these lines in your own playing, and then what happens is something happens on the inside where suddenly you become able to not necessarily repeat the exact lines that you learned. It almost never happens like that, but these ideas come popping out of you. So when you combine that with your technique studies, repertoire developments, you become a proficient player, and you're basically able to speak in some different languages. You become proficient in them. All right, so how do you use these lines? What do you do with these? First of all, you learn them. I'm trying to do. I'm going to put out one a day, 5 days a week for years. What my goal is. So hopefully, encourage me and help me to keep up on this. But in those, try to understand what the line is that you're learning. They're only about 2 minutes. These things, the lessons. It'll take you a little bit longer to learn them, but it's basically a 2-minute lesson. Then either pull up a backing track or use a looper or something, and you start to get these lines under your fingers. Learn the line, learn it note for note, learn how to do it. Then here's the key. You don't just want to learn the line isolated. You want to learn this line and figure out how to integrate it in your playing. So let's say that it's a G minor pentatonic idea. You want to do like a little G minor loop or pull up a G minor backing track, something like that. Then play the line over top of it, get that line down, but don't stop there. This is the key to it. Then you've got to improvise. Do your own playing, have your own language coming out, and then work that line in. If you're able to work that line in, during that, you'll actually be able to work it out on stage. Once you work it out on stage, you'll be able to play it anywhere at any time. Now again, the line might change, but the ideas behind it will always be there. You'll have a mastery of these techniques that allow you to really become a very proficient, capable player. And the last thing I'd say is with these, have fun. You got into music not to learn scales and technique and stuff, although that's very important stuff. It's the weightlifting to a football player, or it's the cardio for a boxer. You've got to have it. You can't be a good football player without weightlifting. You can't be a good boxer without good cardio. But that's not the end of the game. The end of the game is making great music, making great melodies. And part of that is just having fun and being passionate in what you're doing. That's why you learned guitar. That's why you want to keep going in guitar. So when you're doing it, don't let it become a burden, but really let this be a challenge to you, an inspiration to you, and let it really blossom into something inside of you that helps you to become the player that you were meant to become. So I hope you enjoy these lines. I hope you stick with me, and again, encourage me, because I'd like to do a year's worth of these lines and have you learn them. As you learn these lines, please give me some feedback. Tell me what you like, what you don't like, how it's working for you. One note, I have not done tab. I may do tab later down the road or something like that, but really the great players have learned to play and be great by using their ears, not just their eyes. We don't want to be eye players only. We want to be guys who hear stuff. So I'd encourage you to really learn these things with your ears primarily. All right, so anyhow, I hope you have fun with these. And again, give me some feedback. Let me know your